I really feel bad about this guy. He's really got to choose between his ego and reality. What is it we do in the Red Pill? We swap notes. Now, I'm sure people have heard all kinds of different stories about us, but I'm here to give you a glimpse inside the locker room. Here, we're going to discuss the field reports that happened a few years back. Brand new guys who are trying to learn the strategies that we talk about. We built a set of working strategies based on the experience of hundreds of thousands of men. Men swapping notes, iron sharpening iron. Welcome to the locker room. I'm aware the title is confusing and unclear, but the situation is complicated. I am overwhelmed and confused, and I feel like everything I knew about the people closest to me was a lie. Long story short, my daughter Anna cheated on her boyfriend Adam, who I have an amazing relationship with and is now pregnant. The child is not his. The other man doesn't know yet. Adam was on a business trip that lasted about 3 weeks. After he came back, I assume Anna told him about the pregnancy because he called and said he wanted to propose and if I had any tips for him. 3 days later, he comes to drop Anna off, wailing at our house with all of her belongings. Apparently, Anna's friend told him about the cheating. This is the only thing she told us through the crying, and Adam didn't say anything. He just took the stuff out of the car and drove off. I was, and still am, deeply disgusted with my daughter. I did my best to raise her, and I cannot believe she'd do this. I am not able to offer her any comfort or support because I can't justify her actions. She's my daughter, and I love her, but I feel such deep disgust. What she did is despicable. I texted Adam, asking if he was okay. He said he'll be fine. And as if all these conflicting emotions regarding my daughter weren't enough, I have some about my wife now and the way she's handling this. My wife, Mary, as soon as she saw Anna crying, started to yell at Adam, asking what happened. Cursing at him after he ignored her. Her reaction just added to my shock. I brought Anna inside while she was yelling and cussing. We comforted her, gave her water, and sugar when she told us what happened through tears. My wife was shushing her, telling her it was going to be okay. But then she started saying things like, "You'll find somebody better. He wasn't man enough anyway," which kind of disturbed me. She doesn't see anything wrong with what she did. I told her that our daughter did something terrible and nearly got away with doing that to someone that really shouldn't be validating her. I'm not saying we should insult her, but we shouldn't validate her choices either. She disagrees and says she needs our support. I really don't know what to do. I'm disgusted by both of them, but at the same time, they're my wife and daughter. This is the 4th day since it happened, and Anna is posting on her Facebook things like men are trash and bad-mouthing her friend who told Adam. I don't really talk to her. Mary told me, "Don't you dare talk to her about Adam." I started spending more time out of the house. What do? I really need some advice on how to handle this. A couple of terms before we get started. It's a great framing of narcissistic personality disorder by a psychologist and blogger known as The Last Psychologist. He's been around for a while now. He's since been doxxed and no longer contributes, but he makes a very good case that narcissism, as it's defined in the DSV, or the Manual for Psychological Disorders, isn't really very accurate. It just describes grandiosity and self-importance as if it's a disorder, which it's a subset of the disorder, but the real issue is it's about false narratives. Now, I bring it up because in this case, now they did it himself with this guy when he said, "I am a good parent," and that's the subtext of this entire thing. The problem with setting up those kind of narrative fictions is that anything that goes against that narrative will cause something called a narcissistic injury. This is more than just insulting a man or saying something to hurt his feelings. This is literally attacking the framework or his worldview, and your ego has a hard time taking this out. It's usually expressed in something called narcissistic rage, which is more limbic and less social than a normal emotion like anger. In this case, the fact that he considered himself a good parent and then the daughter did something that a good parent's daughter wouldn't do attacked his ego directly. His problem here isn't with his daughter, it's about his self and his ego. And that's something to keep in mind moving forward when you see these things. Sisterhood Uber Alice. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's a nice concept that men need to internalize. Women, to the exclusion of anything else, will take the side of other women. In this case, it's family, and a lot of people have that intrinsic understanding that, of course, family backs family no matter what, which isn't really the case. This girl could have been a best friend. This girl could have been a stranger. This girl could have been the in-law to be, and the guy could have been the son, and it most likely would have came out this same way. We can argue whether it's a hardwired instinct that's been biologically put into us, or a social instinct that's been behaviorally adapted to us. Regardless, it's there. In a situation, women will always take the side of other women, and men will usually take the side of other women. This just means, in any situation, the woman is always the good guy, and the guy is always the bad guy. It's not a failing of people, it's just the way that we're wired. I have a great post, the 5 different ways guys are manipulated, and they're all very standard categorizations. In this case, one that really works is called shame. The reason why narcissistic injuries and narcissistic fantasies in general are bad is because shame directly attacks those in order to achieve an end. In this case, the girl wants to make her daughter feel better. The daughter wants the man to step up and take care of another man's kid. Basically, anything you want to manipulate a person into, shame is a wonderful tool for people who have narcissistic fantasies like this. By telling the guy you're not a real man unless you do this, or you're not a good father unless you do this, they're directly attaching to what these guys want to think of themselves. And so if they think of themselves as a good father, they'll ignore everything and just unilaterally support their daughter, validate her choices, and make her feel better. The advice for this one is kind of difficult because, firstly, you have to know who you're giving advice to. I wouldn't really give advice to the fiance because he's pretty much got a handle on things, at least in this situation. He has certain no-cross lines. He wasn't too ego-invested in the idea of getting married, and when something came up that was a betrayal, he decided to salvage his dignity and do what he should do. Drop her off at her mother's, and the relationship is over. He didn't buckle when the mother-in-law was screaming at him. He didn't buckle for any of it, which is awesome. It's a great chance of holding frame, and I don't know if he can do this all the time, but at least when things are serious, he knows what he has to do. Good for him. The father is the one that's kind of interesting. He doesn't really care. I mean, he does care about his daughter's happiness, and he does care about this situation, but he cares more about his invested worldview. I mean, say what you will about parents. Some like raising good children. Other people like to be good parents. And if you don't know the difference, don't worry, your kids will tell you. And in this case, the daughter told him very clearly. He wanted her to reflect well on him. The fact that she didn't hurt him. And that's why his first instinct, he wants to sit there and lecture her on how to be a good daughter and reflect well on the ego investments that he has. That's his narcissistic script. So my advice for him is you really need to get a more realistic understanding of things. I have an edit that he actually added to this one afterwards, and I'll read it now. Now I see talking about this was a mistake. Half the people commenting on it have no business offering advice to anybody. I am deeply grateful and appreciative of all the helpful advice, but now it has just evolved into personal attacks and judgment of myself and some really hateful comments about women. To clarify, since a lot of you had trouble comprehending this, my goal is to support my daughter in a healthy way without feeding into her misplaced victimhood like what my wife is doing. I do not think validating her attitude is going to do her any favors. In addition, I sought advice on how to get over this utter lack of morality, integrity, and accountability in both my daughter and wife displayed in the last 5 days. I do not hate my daughter, and I do not think saying this isn't about you is fair, since this impacted me directly, my view of people closest to me, and my relationships. Once again, you see there, his language gives it away, and when you read this, you can see it very clearly. He's not talking about how does he make her a better person, how does she solve her problems. This isn't about you, and technically they're right. It's not his situation, it's not his people. He will have to deal with some of the fallout, but his concern is that this affected me. This affected my worldview, not only with my daughter, but with my wife. So my advice to him, well, get good, noob. He has to understand these concepts. Women will back each other regardless of how bad they act. Women don't care for morality, they don't care about integrity, and all the other nonsense terms that he used. Those are guy concepts, and they code to man. They don't code to woman. the fact that he sees his wife in a different light by this, it's not that he sees her differently, he sees her accurately. And yes, it's going to remove his Disney fiction of how men and women interact and how they love each other and what they're like when the push comes to shove. But he now has an accurate assessment of what his relationship with his wife and daughter are like, and he needs to move forward from there. Generally, you tell guys, this is just the way they are, you love them for the way they are, and don't love them for what they can never be. And most people are able to carve out a healthy interpretation of this, and I hope he gets there. Probably won't watch this, but that's fine. You need to take this stuff away for your interpersonal situations. It's not about him, it's about you and me in this case. What's in it for you? In this case, this is exactly what's in it for you. These little moral dilemmas and relationship breakdowns are great because people get to use their frontal lobe to really analyze the situation. Now, for most guys, this is kind of a double-edged sword because they assume that they have ration and they have logic and they have integrity, and they will act the same way the father does. What you need to understand, the important thing to take away from this is logic and rationality in this case are built to justify emotional investments. So once you understand that, you can get to the core of this. His core of this is the actions of his daughter and his wife, in no uncertain terms, changed his worldview about women. And you can tell he's fighting it, because in the edit, the one thing he said is he didn't like people having a negative interpretation about women. Not of his daughter, not of his wife, but of women in general. He's fighting very hard for this, and that's where the conflict goes. So the lesson you need to take away from this is to adjust your worldview based on what you observe around you. And it should go without saying, for a lot of people who, in the modern age, are more so secular, rational, they like to think things through. In this case, if you're seeing something that changes the way you look at certain types of people, then you need to adjust the way you look at certain types of people, not get mad at people for pointing out the obvious. And granted, a lot of the comments are idiots that don't know any better and they just troll or they shit on things just for the sake of it. Not going to justify that. But we can polish this turd, and here we go. I mean, he didn't do anything here, so there is no alternative situation where this has a different outcome. The alternative here is how a man will cope with changing information and how a man adapts to the world outside of him. It's something I talk about often. It's called OODA loops, and that's to observe, to orient, to decide, and then to act. It's an old Air Force term. It had the idea of once you're able to get through these steps on faster repetitions than other people, you're able to make better decisions and outmaneuver. First, he needs to observe. Notice that he's got some faulty mental models, ego investments, narcissistic fantasies. He needs to orient. In this case, understand that yes, okay, wife is going to be like this, daughter is going to be like this. Here's the situation, understand it perfectly. Then decide. In this case, alter the way he sees his wife and daughter, learn to either appreciate them for the way they are with all of their faults, or just to cut loose. I mean, there's nothing saying you can't leave a situation if it's really that untenable for you. And here's kind of the big litmus test for this guy. He either will understand that this is too much for him and leave, or he'll learn to get over it and move forward. But you do that making it as a conscious decision, not some seething, sulking thing that's going to come up later and later and later. That's how resentment builds, and that is the least healthy way to deal with this kind of thing. And then finally, act. Acting is going to happen. You have two choices. You can either act on these things, or you can have life happen to you. And the second one is what most people take because it absolves them responsibility of making the wrong choice. Life is fungible. There are no wrong choices. But if you make a choice that puts you in control of your fates, you're at least taking ownership of your own life. And it's a far more mentally rewarding thing to do than to have the world act upon you and then to sit here like a martyr saying, oh, woe is me, my wife is like this, my daughter's like this, and I don't know. On that note, I'm going to leave you guys to it. Thanks for sticking around. This is another relationship breakdown. This one really does kind of break my heart because as much as I love guys who have this traditional idea of wife and husband and daughter and the son-in-law and everybody getting along happy, I dunk on them a lot on social media, but I will say I always hate to see one fail like this. Part of me kind of wishes it wasn't true. I would love if this was the way it is, but as men, you either got to adapt and overcome, or you end up having these existential crises every time a woman comes around and does something that normal women would do in a normal situation. Reality may not be as polished, may not be as shiny, but you know what? At least you know what you're in for. And on that note, catch you guys on the next one. Cheers.